The air dried clay that I'll be using today is by Crayola. I use this one because it's affordable and you can find it at most craft stores. I got this 5-pound tub for about $10 from Michael's. I also believe you can find this same clay at Amazon or Hobby Lobby. I normally leave this clay in the container that it comes in because it's airtight and I don't have to wrap it up when I'm done using it. Here's some of my favorite tools to use when working with air dried clay. First thing that you'll need is a rolling pin. You'll need this to roll out your clay and make it smooth. If you don't have access to a rolling pin, you can use anything you have at home, like a smooth bottle or a soda can that doesn't have any ridges. The next tool I recommend is a small precision knife, like an X-Acto knife or a butter knife, or you can even use a plastic knife. This comes in hand when you need to cut out or score the clay. I also suggest you use a straight edge for when you need to cut straight lines out on the clay. I use this plastic ruler. I also like to use wax paper sometimes as a surface to work on, or I'll even use plywood or some sort of silicone mat just to make sure I'm working on a clean and smooth surface. Now, other wood tools are definitely nice to have, but not necessary. You can usually find most things that you need to make your piece in your home. And the absolutely most important tool you need are your hands. All the tools that I've shown so far are great to have, but not necessary if you're just getting started or you're just trying to pick up a new hobby. When starting a new piece, I like to start with slip. It's just a simple mixture of water and clay, and it's used like a glue to stick different pieces of clay together. It's really up to you on the consistency you want the slip to be, but I like to start with a few pieces and then slowly add in more water and mix it. Then I'll decide if I need more water or more clay. Next are a few basic rolling techniques. The first is called slab building. This is just rolling your clay out into flat pieces. I like to use stacks of popsicle sticks to help roll out the clay evenly. Next is called coiling, which is rolling out the clay with your hands in long coil pieces. This is good for building things like pots, bowls, and even plates. And last is the pinch method, which is basically self-explanatory. You're just pinching the clay into any shape that you want. Now that we have some of the basics down, I'm going to be using some of the techniques I mentioned to create this Tic Tac Toe clay board and talk about some of the most common questions I've seen when working with air dried clay. One question I always see is how to avoid cracking in the clay. One thing I like to do is to avoid making pieces that are too thin. Generally, you'll want the clay to be at least a 1/4 inch thick, not too thin, not too thick. Here I'm just rolling out the clay to be the size that I want. This piece will be the milk part of the Tic Tac Toe board. You also want to make sure that you don't let your clay stick to the surface that you're working on because it can be kind of hard to pull up. While you're rolling out your clay, or if you flip it over, if you notice any type of ridges, you can always use your little spatula to smooth it out. Next, I'm just going to trace out the shape of milk, kind of like a spilled milk type of thing. So I'm just going to trace that out with this wooden toothpick sort of shape tool. You can also use your X-Acto knife, a regular sized toothpick, or some sort of precision knife. You can make this part as big or as small as you want it to be. Here I'm rolling out the clay so that I can cut out straight pieces to go around the side of the Tic Tac Toe board. To attach clay pieces together, you want to score the base. Once you finish scoring, you can add some slip, and this will act like glue to glue the two pieces of clay together. To make sure that your pieces stick together, you can also try scoring your strips. Once you're done cutting out all of your pieces, you can also use the straight edge to cut the ends of these strips to make sure that they're nice and straight and they'll fit nice and evenly around your clay board tray. Make sure that you press down into the clay, or you can use a wooden tool to mash the different pieces of clay together. If your pieces are not connected properly, this could lead to cracking, so make sure that you are pressing them tightly together or use slip to glue it. Now, using the same slicing method, you want to cut out smaller pieces. These will be the pieces that go inside and start to form your Tic Tac Toe Board. Make sure that you score the inside of the board to attach the smaller pieces. Adding the smaller pieces of clay was a little tricky, but just make sure that you cut them all the exact same size and be sure to stick them to the longer pieces of clay. Instead of throwing away the old scraps of clay, I like to scrape them up with my spatula and add them to my slip container. This way I make sure I'm not wasting any clay, and then I can have a full jar of slip. I know it may be tempting thinking that your air dry clay will probably dry better and faster if you set it out in the sun or a hot spot or even use a blow dryer, but that is the worst idea. Don't do that. When you're finished with your piece, you want to put it in a dark or warm area like your closet, cabinet, or some sort of cupboard. Your clay will take 24 to 48 hours depending on how big or how small it is. My piece took about a day to fully dry. You'll know it's fully dry once the clay turns white. Now that all my pieces are done, I did let them dry for about 48 hours or 2 days. This is what it'll look like after day 2. You'll notice mine is still a little yellow in this clip, so I did end up waiting another day and then it eventually turned white. After your clay is mostly or completely dry, you can also trim it. I like to use this metal tool to scrape the sides just to try to smooth out some of the edges. You also want to make sure that you're careful during this step. As you can see here, I got a little carried away and a piece broke off, but it's not super hard to fix. Scratch the parts where the clay broke off and then add some slip and reattach it. This is how the clay looks when it's fully dried. When it's wet, it is sort of yellow, gray, and once it's dry, it'll turn a white shade. Now for my favorite part, painting. I'm using a mix of heavy body paints and also a couple of cheaper paints that I picked up from Michael's. And now these shades are not the exact shade as the actual marshmallow color of the Lucky Charm, so I am using different colors to mix and try to get the same shades. The hardest color to achieve was the cereal pieces. I ended up mixing a little bit of that golden yellow and brown to get the perfect shade. Smaller pieces are a little hard to paint. My hands did end up getting very dirty during this process, so if you have any tips on how to paint smaller pieces, please let me know. I painted one side at a time, let it dry for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then flipped it over and painted the other side. After that was done, I painted the design. After you're done painting all of your pieces, make sure that you let it dry for at least 3 to 4 hours or even longer depending on the size and the amount of paint that you applied. After your pieces are completely dry, you're going to varnish it. I'm using this one by Liquitex. It is a glossy finish. So I'm just going to add a couple coats of that and then leave it out to dry for 24 hours. And you're all done. This didn't come out as glossy as I thought it would, but I still think it added a nice touch to the final piece. Thank you so much for watching this video, and leave a comment below if you made it to the end. I'm still a beginner, so I don't know all the tips and tricks, but hopefully these can help you out in your next project.